today we've got one little piece of the whole overlay of the change grid and flow to finish up. And then depending on how deep that takes us into our allotted time, I may end the call early, I may begin the next subject that we have in the queue for what's going on. Now, before we started the recording, I mentioned that several of our colleagues have sent me notes that they're going to be watching the January 6th hearings right now. And so they, our usual crowd won't be on the call, but it's still got a bunch of in. I want to go over a couple little things, but Brian brought up a very interesting subject. And I do think it's interesting. Okay, Brian, I know that you are a US citizen. Is that right?
Yes, I'm a dual citizen. Yes.
You're a dual citizen. Okay.
Yes.
And I know Joseph is on the call from the Netherlands. And so we got Joseph Nasir, which have you always been here? Is that your background? You just yet another American?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yet another.
Yet another American. And so so I think it's interesting to have kind of a collection of people with different backgrounds on the call because it leads to questions. And long story short, Brian had posed a question earlier on, and that is, what is it that someone really hopes to gain? So whatever it is anyone that's doing, he was asking specifically about what the goal of the hearings really was. And we were just chatting about, in my little opinion, I think it's just a quest for the truth, whatever that even means anymore. But I find what's most fascinating about what's going on when you view it from a tension management perspective. And so I wanted to finish up this one little piece that we kind of started talking about on our last call, but didn't really, I think, bring it all to closure. And I think it's also a good way to illustrate what Brian was bringing up. So what's this really, really, really all about? And so let me give you guys kind of a revisit of the nature of change. You learned in the nature of change that humans really want one thing. So what's the one thing that humans really want?
Control.
Control. So in order for someone to want more control, they have to currently feel as though they are either, what are the possibilities?
Out of control.
That they're either, something is out of control and they want to seize control. Maybe they've got a certain level of control and want more control. And maybe they believe everything is already in control just the way that it is. So, but it's this whole idea about people aren't resistant to change. They're resistant to losing control. People change in order to gain or maintain control. And so the first thing that I would say to you is that as you are looking at all of these different situations that are happening, not only here in the US, but all over the world, you have to first of all go into knowing you are a trained and skilled tension manager. Set everything else aside and look at the situation through that lens. And what you'll really find out very quickly is this is all about control. So when we're looking at Putin, it's about control. When we're looking at whatever Boris, what's his face, was doing in the UK, it's all about control. Everything going on with January 6th, everything going on in our own, it's all about people wanting to gain or maintain a level of control or a sense of control over it. Now, depending on who the person is, their kind of frame they put around that control could certainly be different. So there are people who are driving this whole tension management thing that because they want to move you to a particular place energetically so that you will do what they're asking you to do. If nothing else, they want you to believe and think and feel and value those things that they believe and think and feel and value. And so they're trying to influence you. Well, that only happens at certain places on the change grid if they're going to be successful. Others are trying to give you a false sense of security, saying like, there's nothing to be worried about. It's all taken care of, whatever. They're trying to get you to relinquish the control that you have. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about the threshold of delegation. So the threshold of delegation, got to go back one slide if we want to look at the official one. It's the level of tension at which someone really willingly relinquishes control. Now soak in that for just a second. It is a level of tension at which someone says, I'm letting go of this. Maybe they're consciously letting go of it at a certain point in the process as we move further downgrade, closer and closer to that threshold of delegation. We start to consider letting go of something. We might test the waters of letting go of something, but at a certain time we go, no, I'm comfortable. I'm going to relinquish that control. I'm going to delegate whatever the task is, whatever the authority is, whatever the power is to someone else. I'm taking my control and giving someone else that control. So I'm giving fuel to whatever it is that they're doing simply by the act of letting go. So as I move further and further downgrade, I'm paying less and less attention to what's
Mm,
really going on. And so if someone wants to manipulate me, all they really have to do is convince me that it's okay to let go, that I've got other more important things to be concerned about. Don't worry about this one. We'll take care of it for you. At the same time, I've got another group of people who are focusing on the people who are already upgrid. And if you're already upgrid, you're looking for someone to rescue you. You feel as though you have no control, even though you may have more than you believe you do. So there is this feeling of being out of control that may or may not match a reality that you are, in fact, out of control. The more out of control you feel, the more valuable the solution becomes. If
mm,
someone can position themselves as the solution, then you will it's not so much you're giving them the control, but you're allowing them to control you because you don't believe you can control things yourself. So as I
interesting.
talk about those two extremes, just a second, I want to just throw this question to you guys. Do you believe that there are plenty of examples that you could come up with where people who are trying to influence others will intentionally intensify the level of tension, will magnify this? Remember, the further upward you go, the more reality is distorted. And so can they further distort it to move you further and further upgrade so you reach a stress point where you, again, it's not about you relinquishing control because you don't believe you have any of that. It's about proclaiming, without someone to intervene on my behalf, I can do nothing. We've got to support the people who are going to save us because the enemy is at the door and blah, blah, blah. So can you guys
Mhm.
kind of see where there's evidence of that and all sorts of things that you're, um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, far more quietly, but nevertheless there is the counter behavior. And that is convincing people that they've got nothing to worry about at all, that there's no tension to worry, everything's just fine. You know, we live in the land of opportunity. We hear these messages that just say, you know what, you live in a place of great freedom. You live in a place of where there's tremendous peace of mind or whatever. So why don't you just go about amusing yourself? Just go about living your life and don't even worry about this. So sign over your proxy and we'll vote on your behalf, or
Mhm.
just we stop thinking about who the people are that are running for office and just vote the party line. So that's the easiest thing to do. Don't worry about it. It's all going to be fine. And so you hear these kinds of messages where you're really can hear the person is trying to get you to relinquish your control, to give them the control that you actually possess. So could you guys think of examples where that may actually be happening as well?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
these are all grand manipulations. And right now I'm only talking about the manipulations that occur in upgrade and downgrade situations because we've been talking about the thresholds. There are also manipulations that occur outgrid. Remember that the outgrid area is all about, let me get to my engagement rings. It's all about someone moving from awareness into an intention. So it's one thing to be aware that X is happening. It's another thing to say, well, now that I'm aware that X is happening, we need to whatever, or I'm going to, some statement of intention. has to form, otherwise nothing changes. There's no momentum. There's no driving force behind it. Now we know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. At a certain point in time, those intentions must lead to active engagement, to doing the kinds of things that need to be done in order to fulfill that intention. And so you got to be doing it. And sometimes you can get really aggressive about the whole thing for a lot of reasons, both positive or negative. You could end up becoming very aggressive, very assertive, not necessarily with other people, but even with your own focus, your own way that your daily time is being managed, and you can end up executing on something. Executing is a very aggressive level of engagement, or more of a final stage of engagement where you're getting it done. It's done, it's done. So we do use the word execution, though, because it also implies that, or it also offers the possibility that you're killing something. And we do that as a warning for people that are in the outgrid danger zone, which most of this execution part is actually in the danger zone, because we let them know that while you might be achieving a task, you're achieving the task at what cost? You could be killing other opportunities. You could be killing relationships. You could be killing whatever the spirit is, the soul of the company, whatever it is. So you have to become aware of how you're going about taking engagement to fulfillment of that, so that you can execute without death being involved. So death of belief, death of values, death of whatever. So can you imagine that if I wanted to manipulate you, I could also manipulate you by using the outgrid maneuvers to excess. Now, the outgrid maneuvers are all about encouraging someone to step further outgrid, take a risk, step up to the challenge and prove to yourself that you've got the ability to do that. I believe in you. I want you to believe in yourself. Take that chance, take that step, get out of that comfort zone, go out there, live your life, make it happen. I mean, in all candor, how many people on the professional speaking circuit are doing precisely that during their keynote addresses? They're encouraging people to move outgrid. Well, can you imagine if we add a little sinister element to all that? I'm telling you, make this, are you aware of this? Well, the intention should be blah, blah, blah. We need you to get engaged and get out there and start killing things. And yes, it's going to be challenging, but we believe you've got the ability. And so this is where, when I would say, rebel forces end up being created, where movements end up being created. So it's great that I can get, if I'm someone who wants to run a movement, I can get the people that are upgrid to support my movement because they feel so out of control. Simultaneously, I can get more of an army of people behind whatever this execution happens to be, because they don't care. They'll do whatever it is because they're letting you make those decisions about how resources are spent or whatever. They're downgrid about the whole thing.
Isn't self-help out there? Because I just loathe when I hear that terminology. When people go to the Tony Robbins events and then they don't know how to apply it, but it's almost as if they know you better than you know you, so they devise the steps that you must take as if it is a one size fits all, right? And then when it doesn't, you can't achieve it, then you can blame the book, you can blame the program, blame the course, and all these kinds of things.
Absolutely right. But if that program, that course, and I could name a dozen of them off the top of my head that have existed during my lifetime, if they can get you, whoever's marketing or developing that program may very well go, I don't want it to just be a program. I want to turn it into a movement, something that people are actually going to change. And that could be a really positive thing. Make no mistake about it. If the intention behind it is to do good, well, then that could be a very good kind of thing to rally people behind it and let them know that it's time that they hit their threshold of activation. In fact, lower that threshold of activation, because you shouldn't have been putting up with this long, you know what I mean? So oops, sorry. So a lot of the work is about helping people to discover their own personal authentic truth, to help them realize that these, one of the things that people upgrid do is awfulize. Awfulizing is made up of two words, awful and lies. And so when people is this far upgrade, they're telling themselves very often these awful lies about what's really going on. So the world is out to get me. What makes you think you're important enough that the world even notices you? You know, so you just kind of like to need to help these people to recognize that they're being fed a diet of awful lies. And they have started to believe these awful lies, and they're starting to share these awful lies about what's going on. That doesn't mean there's not truth upgrade. There may very well be an underlying truth that needs to be noticed and paid attention to. There's some work that needs to be done. But do I need to aggravate the person, terrify the person, awaken the emotions of the upgrade danger zone, anger, grief, fear, and shame, in order to get someone to look at something that needs to be looked at and do something positive around it? Wow. And so I know I'm babbling for quite a while, but this is why whenever I'm reading something in social media or in the so-called news, or I'm listening to any kind of a news report, I can't not listen to it through this lens of tension management. And so my goal is to just say, just what's the truth? What is the stuff that's sitting on the heart line? Because that's the stuff that I can probably actually do something with, but I can't become this outgrade person because, Brian, you were talking about how they can get you to do certain things. They can get you this far outgrade to become one of their extended henchmen. So they can get you to not just support whatever the upgrade or downgrade messaging is, not only repeat the upgrade messaging or downgrade messaging, as the case may be, but in fact, adopt it as if it's their own. So it's not supporting another person's perspective. It's about saying, no, I share the same perspective.
Yeah, those are the rebels. I've seen them in many of the countries I lived in, and you see them like actually mature in that kind of level of mentally digesting that. Yeah, this is my own. I'm like, where did this come from? Like you see like literal change.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, keep in mind that it's all about what you've been fed. And so everything that you see, hear, feel, probably taste and smell, I imagine smell for sure, but so why not taste? It's all about managing your tension, getting you to pay attention to certain things. That's what our 5 physical senses are really, they're there to basically do. And so, I completely get that there are upgrade situations and downgrade situations. I'm concerned about the people who are usurping your personal, your authentic self, usurping your personal power to take care of you, to be the best you that you can be. They're saying like, you either can't do it or don't worry about it. It's beneath you to even bother doing it. Anyway, I'm babbling around about all this, but the people who are trying to manipulate you are trying to gain control over whatever area it is. So, is it political power? Is it, I don't know, whatever it is, you're trying to gain or maintain control over one or more areas for whatever reasons you have. It could be good, could be sinister, whatever those reasons are, you're trying to gain a greater level of control around that. And so I get this. You could be using this strategy, focusing on the threshold of activation. You could be using the downgrade strategy, but from this strategy, you will notice certain people who resonate with you in a very natural way and can articulate the message, etc. They're turning you into leaders. Remember, leadership lives in this outgrade quadrant. And the further outgrade you go, leadership is going to increase, but at a certain point in time, the leadership has a very dark shadow over it. You're no longer a leader. Now you're an autocrat. Now you are a whatever it is. Remember, this is where warmongering and all that kind of fight. If I pulled out the adjective map, you'd see all that sorts of stuff there. So they want to recognize those. So that would be an outgrid maneuver. That was a very long way to get to this idea that I can manipulate you by moving you upgrid, downgrid. I can also manipulate you by moving you outgrid and by moving you ingrid. So the more I can move you in grid, where you become more and more timid, more and more passive, you participate less and less, you exist, but you aren't living. The more I can do something to subordinate you or to intimidate you into shutting up, the more I can squash those qualities, those beliefs, those messages, the more silent you're going to become. So this is a very long kind of
no, I find this fascinating. Actually, I was going to ask, is the upgrade downgrade thresholds a play on extrinsic and intrinsic?
I would say to you that both the focusing on the thresholds is going to be more about extrinsic stuff, period. The more you approach the heart line, the more the intrinsic stuff can happen. Because to me, the biggest loss that is happening when people are moving you upgrid or downgrid, and I'm talking about the media, I'm talking about whoever it is, when they move you upgrid or they move you downgrid, they are, how do I want to say this, turning off increasingly significant levels of your individuality, of your personal authority, of your personal awareness, of the real essential you. They're all terrified of the essential you, because if they allow you to actually have your own beliefs based on facts, and values, by the way, are based on a lot of different life circumstances. And so it's perfectly possible for you to have a totally different set of values because of your life experience than someone else is going to have. That doesn't mean one is right or wrong or good or bad. It just means that multiple values are going to drive what you put value on, what you think is a top priority. Like for me, it's healthcare. And I don't mind saying to all of you, one of the biggest reasons why I am more issue driven than party driven is because I've owned my own business all of my life. And for all of my life, I've carried good medical insurance. But in the past, 6, 8, 10 years, the cost of medical insurance for the self-employed has become absolutely untenable. So if you make more than $70,000 a year, you are not eligible for any subsidies. And so, but those subsidies are so valuable that for you to have the equivalent level of protection that those subsidies would enable you to have, you'd have to make an additional $30,000 or more. So if you make $1 more than 70, you lose $30,000 worth of benefits you might otherwise have had you made $1 less than the 70, or whatever the exact number is. It changes all the time. So does that encourage independent business owners who can't get life insurance, can't get medical insurance through any kind of a group setting? You're not part of a group, you're a standalone. Does that encourage you or just discourage you to build your business?
Yeah, you're discouraged.
Discourage you, because unless you can build it for greater than 100, which, by the way, you still have that 30,000. And I'm giving these numbers, those were our exact numbers. Mine and Linda's medical insurance went to $2,500 per month. And that's with a $15,000 deductible each. So before we'd get any real benefit from the insurance that was available to us as a private business owner, we would probably have to part with close to $60,000 out of our own pockets before we'd get any benefit from spending that $30,000 on the insurance element alone. So anyway, I was saying all this to just say that when it comes to all these things that move people or upgrade, downgrade, it's got a great deal to do with what is it that you value. Well, personally, I value myself and I value my wife, and I'd like us not to get sick. Now we're both over 65, so we have Medicare, so that's all fine. But nevertheless, for many years, and I'm sure it's true for many of you, your medical insurance is coming out of your personal pocket. Unless you are making under 70, in which case you qualify for some subsidies, or you're going to have to be making well over 100 to even have that 70 work for you. I'm babbling, but hopefully you understand what I'm actually saying here. So I value healthcare. I believe that healthcare is a core human right. I believe is morally reprehensible for anybody to make a profit off of the illness or injury of another person. So yeah, you should get well compensated if you're a medical professional for all of your talents and the investments you've made in your education. Yeah. I'm not saying people shouldn't be treated well, but to think that you can actually buy stock that could make you rich as long as the population is sufficiently sick and you don't pay out the benefits to offset it, then good for you. Making a profit off of somebody else's illness or injury is morally reprehensible. Now, that's a value that I have. Well, we have a lot of friends who worked for large corporations all their life. They were part of unions. And so now in their retirement, the insurance that they have for working for that corporation, part of their retirement plan, for whatever the union might have been. Oh my gosh, their insurance is astounding. And they're paying little or nothing out of their own pocket. So when they hear people grumble about the cost of life insurance or what healthcare in the US, their thought is, well, that doesn't affect me. So I don't value that concern as greatly as I might value some other concern. And so I'm bringing this all up just to say that value is also a very critical part of this whole tension management thing. I'm manipulating you based on your value system. And if I can raise your tension, because that's what I want to do really, really great, or maybe I need to lower your tension, or maybe a really strong movement needs to be able to do both of these things to a certain degree to increase the followers that they happen to have. Now, by the way, everything I've just rattled off is also inherent in someone having a successful YouTube channel. So your YouTube channel has either got to relate to an upgrade audience or it's got to help people find a downgrade state. Maybe it can be provocative enough. Maybe, they're thinking about all this, but that would kind of be the rare kind of person to do something. Yeah. All right.
Interesting.
I've been talking nonstop for a half an hour, so I'm kind of curious to know what you guys. So Brian, Nasir, Edie, Joseph, anything you guys want to share, just feel free to unmute and see what you
that's why I asked that question, because this idea of valuing from axiology, which is the formal name for value science, they tend to look at things through 3 dimensions: the intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic.
Yes.
And the gap is bigger if you look at an upside down V, so to speak. The gap is bigger in terms of systemic because it's a dualistic perspective, whereas intrinsic, or if you move down the ladder, extrinsic and intrinsic have more properties. Like, intrinsic is where we place human values, so it has infinite properties, right? Then extrinsic is the next level up. So when people are trying to manipulate downgrid, my thinking was, the perceived ability is quite high, so maybe they're trying to manipulate the intrinsic value where, self-acceptance, because I see people hiding behind work, right? Like, and there's no amount of success that can make up for the lack of self-acceptance. And a lot of times it becomes a path of, the inadequacies that one is experiencing, and they'll just stay downgrid forever. Because it's comfortable.
Yeah, let me give you an example of this that perhaps many of you can relate to. So let's say that there is a group of people in your community that are trying to get a law passed, an ordinance change, whatever it happens to be. In order for that to even become a serious subject of discussion, you have to get it on the agenda, or you have to get it on the ballot. And to get it on the agenda or get it on the ballot, sometimes you have to be able to document that there is sufficient interest and support in whatever your proposition happens to be, that it merits the attention of whatever the government group happens to be at whatever level it happens to be turning out at. And so a lot of people will say, well, we need to get this on the ballot. So we have to have a petition, lots of signatures on a petition to even get to the first level of muster, blah, blah, blah. And they go out there with their petitions and they do their best to get as many signatures as they possibly can so that they can put them all together and say, look, we've got the 50,000, 100,000, whatever the number is that is minimum in order to get the attention. Okay, so you guys can all relate to this. When they came to you and said, I want you to sign the petition, did you read every word of what the proposal was? Did you really understand what it is they were talking about? Or did you willingly relinquish control because it was easier to sign it than it was to trouble yourself with it? Or because you knew the person and liked the person, you just had one of your biases come into play and you just signed because they asked you to and you like them and whatever. Did you just read a couple of words on the in the proposal and go, well, no, I'm all in favor of blah, 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 but you didn't read the fine print, and that's where all the, devil's in the details. So I'm saying all that just to say that the whole idea about people going out there trying to get people to sign petitions is actually an effort to get you to delegate your control. Because by signing it, you're saying that the people who are bringing this proposal forward have all of you supporting them, all of you believing in it, everyone who signed that in this downgrade kind of way. That's how you use the threshold of delegation in order to get someone. You lower their tension sufficiently that they simply do what you're asking them to do, which is basically relinquish the control you have yourself so that they can make the decisions for you and they can drive something through. And of course, they understand the ballot a lot better. They understand the whatever the proposal is a lot better than you do. Maybe they do. Maybe they just got recruited by someone who knew it and said, could you just go out and get a bunch of people to sign this? You guys with me on this?
Yeah, I'd say I'm the anal kind of person that would say, okay, you have a seat because I'm going to read every word on here.
Yeah, yeah. And you need to. That's the whole thing. Because people don't realize this is not a time for you to be downgraded, and this is not a time for you to be manipulated by people who are trying to move you downgrade. Oh, just sign this, the rest will take care of itself. It's even like a class action lawsuit to me is a perfect example of using the threshold of delegation. When you tell a population that you're going to fight on their behalf to get money they didn't even know that they were owed, they're just saying like, yeah, just sign here, send us in your proxy or whatever it is. And the day comes that you actually do get a payoff. I forget which one when it was that Linda and I received. I don't know, it's got to be a few years ago. It had something to do with some misbehavior on the part of Bank of America. And because of the misbehavior, and we were part of whatever the little group is, because we signed the little proxy statement, we got a check for 21 cents. And so,
wow.
Yeah, we got 21 cents. Who knows how much money the law firm that was actually driving this whole issue, had to deal with. But that's the threshold of the delegation in action. The less unless you're concerned about something, great. The more of your power you're going to give to me.
Interesting. Very interesting. Have you used this in training? Like how
no
do you
one's
use
going to
this in
pay.
training?
No one's going to pay for this.
But no, I can see it like being a key part of explaining cultural dynamics, because they're either up or down or on that heart line, and they're not
right.
the
But
example
Brian,
on the right.
you got to think about who hired you.
That's true.
Is the
Yeah.
person who's hiring you. This is something I truly believe. Anyone who's trying to influence anyone to do anything is deeply terrified of the Heartline experience. They're
Yeah.
terrified of flow, because why? Now you're being logically ruled. You are looking at something through a balanced lens that examines the self, others, and information in general. So there's an appreciation for the facts. Sorry about that. An appreciation for the facts. There's all kinds of things going on here where you're being very thoughtful and prudent about it. All those things you guys know about power is holding true. Logically ruled reasoning abilities. You believe that your resources are adequate, and so you need to be thoughtful and prudent as you're going about doing something. You are in an aggressive information gathering mode, believing that for everything you know, there is probably something you don't know yet. Because keep in mind, every point along that heart line, there is still a gap between your current and your envisioned level of ability, or the current and envisioned level of challenge that one might encounter. And so this is a place where you're going to be asking very good questions, and you're going to be weighing out the relative merits. All those things you know to be true of power are definitely helping here. And you know what? While I could convince someone in power to join my movement, the truth is that going to take more or less work than manipulating you upgrade or downgrade?
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, a
Yeah.
lot of discussions, a lot of debate, a lot of answering the same questions over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah, so they don't want you there. This perfect world over here, good grief. If we lived in this perfect world where all decisions were made along the heart line, and we took correct action while we're on the heart line, and we delegated things that would be a growth experience for somebody else to take care of, instead of us hanging on to something and depriving that person of the growth experience. I mean, imagine if you lived in that world, a lot of good stuff would be happening a lot more quickly. We wouldn't have all this upgrade nonsense and all this downgrade apathy that the manipulators are counting on.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about selling it, in my experience, my clients have always wanted me, and I'm going to generalize this to all of you that are consultants, to find a way to get a bigger fire built under people, to raise their level of tension, to get them more active, more productive. They want us to move people upgrid and outgrid for them. Those are both, the kind of manipulations that are positive, but don't think for one second that any business owner actually wants to have an entire staff of people that everyone is on the heart line of power.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that would be like? If everyone had an opinion, everyone had facts, everyone wanted to discuss and debate, and it's all good stuff, make no mistake about it. Everything that happens on the heart line is good quality stuff. But how much time does good quality stuff often require?
Yeah, it takes time.
Yeah, because my client wants me to produce the outcome now. They want this performance improvement to happen. They want this bottom line increase. That's what they want right now. Once in a while, they'll do a team building sort of a thing. They'll realize that their team is slipping too far down grid, and they've got a lot of people who've got a lot of ability, who aren't really stretching themselves, aren't really going after growth opportunities. They're resting on their laurels, all that kind of stuff. Now they would hire us to put a fire underneath these people, motivate and inspire, energize, engage, and move them out grid as well, so they're getting more stuff done. But that's who's paying us. Move them down and out, move them up, or rather, no, that they want us to move them up or move them out or move them up and out, as the case may be. People really don't often hire us to lower someone's level of tension.
Got it.
I can think of cases where they have hired us for that. If there's a crisis in the organization, if there's a big merger going on and people are terrified of what's going to happen during the merger, people pay attention to where they find their tension. And so I want to make sure they're paying attention to what's really going on, not what might happen to them down the road. So I may have to lower their level of tension so they're not afraid of what the future is going to hold for them. Let's see, Joseph, you got your hand up. You're welcome to unmute and share anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, hello guys.
Hey there.
Hi.
Thanks for writing on so much interesting stuff. So my question is, I heard you talking about moving people outgrid and upgrade.
Yeah.
And in most cases that would make sense. But I was thinking about using the tension management system for cases where burnout and stress in organizations giving unwanted outcomes. So
Well,
maybe you could talk about that some.
Yeah. In fact, Joseph, I think that when we go into most of these situations, the truth is that there is an opportunity for us to do both of those things. But the population is going to be different. So for example, if a client is hiring me because they need more productivity, they need more performance, they need more growth, what level of tension must they be experiencing about productivity, performance, and growth? You know, they're up in stress about it.
Yep.
That's who's hiring me. They're up in stress. And so I got to move them downgrade so they know we've got training, we've got coaching, we've got things we can do to help this whole situation. But meanwhile, if the people are too far downgrade, I can't, I got to do the opposite with that group to get everybody up to a productive place.
And actually, the big problem is with stress and burnout, it is causing trouble, but the management won't be an upgrade about it, so they won't take action, right?
Well, and that's the whole idea. They're upgrid about the situation, but where are they on the grid when it comes to the resolution to the situation? So first of all, if they're upgrid, how does that affect the quality of the solutions they come up with?
Oof. Yeah, it's probably compromised.
Compromising it. They're being very reactive, you know, grabbing hold of that first life ring that anyone throws their way. I'm talking about way up in stress right now. But yeah, okay. So their judgment. And again, even if you look at the basic reference guide for the 5 levels of tension, you know that it says that the people who are this far upgrid are in a reactive decision-making mode. Their emotions are distorting reality. They feel as though they have little or no resources, and so they have to grab hold of the first thing they possibly can. Well, they're so preoccupied with that, the likelihood of them coming up with a good solution isn't very good at all. I need to lower their level of tension so they can become good problem solvers first, then cooperative agents of that resolution or of that change, and ultimately get the job done. And so, yeah, so to Joseph's point, I think that a lot of times the people will talk about all of the chaos, all the pain, all the problem, but I have to get them calmed down in order for them to be in a state of mind or a state of energy where they can actually look at and do something about their situation. In fact, I often joked about this. I said that if all of us really think about what we do for a living, we're all straight commission psychotherapists. You think about that? You know, no, insurance isn't paying any of us. Well, maybe if you're a clinical psychologist, you got your license, maybe you can get some insurance kind of coverage. No. That's not what's happening for most of us. We got to do a really good job of finding the deal, closing the deal, and then deliver on it. And so all of it ends up being that I'm paying myself to do it. It's all straight commission psychotherapy.
Actually, I did that this week.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw a program how about how they are actually selling more.
Yeah.
But I gave them a free session as a bonus about how to develop more self-awareness. But but that's because I thought they wouldn't pay for it, but I thought they would need it.
Yeah. That's great. Great. Well, I want to share something with you guys now that we're on this topic, this idea about that the people that are too far upgrade are living in a distorted reality. They don't really know everything that they need to know, and they forget that they do know stuff that they did need to know. So there's all kinds of problems up here with resource availability. And the people that are downgrid are equally distorted in their reality because they're believing that everything is perfectly under control and it could just be nothing more than an illusion, because tension and attention go together. No tension, no attention, you end up falling by the wayside. And so someone posted something, I don't know if it was on Facebook, but these people that are too far upgrid or downgrid, I'm just going to say this, have a different view of what's actually going on. And even if they're talking to someone else who seems to be of a similar energy and a similar mindset, that person has their own experience of whatever it is that's going on here. So are these people even agreeing on that? You know, or is they just upgrade and it's all scrambling around? I'm babbling, but it'll make a sense. It makes sense in just a second. So somebody posted this. I'll slide it into the screen so we can read it together. I read a book that blew my mind. I wish they had labeled the book. I read a book that blew my mind. The main character goes crazy when he realizes no one really knows him. The gist is that the person you think of as yourself exists only for you, and even you don't really know who that is. Every person you meet, have a relationship with, or make eye contact on the street with creates a version of you in their heads. You're not the same person to your mom, your dad, your siblings than you are to your coworkers, your neighbors, or your friends. There are 1,000 different versions of yourself out there in people's minds. A you exists in each version, and yet your you, yourself, isn't really a someone at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree with that. This whole identification of I, when we use that, for the most part, when we used to see that in the laboratory, it's almost static. And that's the thing, that's what gets people in trouble. So an event moves on and they're trying to carry the same I forward, and you know, it doesn't work. So, you know, we have this saying in South Africa that you never look at the new dawn through yesterday's eyes.
Oh, I like it.
And a lot of times that's exactly what people are experiencing. They're taking this new occasion, a new moment, and they're looking at it through the lens of yesterday, and it doesn't fit the mode. So they don't see that I is being fluid. They almost experience it as static.
Right, as a thing instead of as a you know, living process.
Right.
Yeah. Well, when I saw this, what really got my attention around it was that I think that we could talk about the relationships or your perception of yourself and where that all exists on the change grid. But I'll give you guys the Gifted Students program. We're on the change grid. Would you have the most authentic view of yourself?
Heartline.
On the heart line, specifically in the center of the change grid. So that power point in there, that's where you are detached from what's going on. You're kind of in the middle of that little island, in the middle of that stream, everything. So you're in a really good place for self-examination, for self-awareness. I would say to you that even then, the version of you that you realize you are at that center is merely, what I want to say, a subset of what probably your whole personal truth really is.
Exactly.
But
absolutely.
nevertheless, that version of you is probably a much more accurate, authentic version of yourself than you would have if you were up in stress or down in apathy or way over in being amiable or being very far out grid. This is where things get distorted. And so, or you might be projecting a different you on purpose. So who knows what's really going on? So, and this is, oh, that's interesting to see that you're saying that. He's saying the center of the heart line appears to be the epitome of being in the world, but no of the world, but not of the world. One of the things we say in the basic ChangeWorks training is that people at the center of the change grid are in the world, but not of it. They let the winds of heaven dance around them. They understand that no one can push the river and no one can pull the sprout. And so it's a really interesting kind of place of detachment and clarity that comes with that detachment. I think that's where you are the safest when it comes to attempted manipulations foisted upon you by others. I think that's where you are the most safe, the most resilient, because you have the ability to step out of the situation and view it critically. Like I said a while ago, I can't watch TV or read anything and not have this lens of tension management come instantly into play. So that's just what happens if you do something long enough. So I think that's certainly true. And I think this is a really wonderful thing to say to someone if you're working with them as a coach, is say, who are you? How many different yous do you think you've created and offered to the world? How many different versions of you have you offered to yourself? Which one of them is the real you, or which combination? What's the truth and what's a distortion? What's a creation? And for what purpose did you create that version of you? I think that'd be a great thing to work through with a client, particularly for doing something like the Oracle of the Self, and you're learning to talk to you about you.
We did that in a training one time at Cornell. It was a physician leadership training, and they had us put on those name label things, and we had a name label for each identification,
Yep.
father, son, cousin, whatever. You have this whole shirt full of these label things, and they wanted to, they were helping us try to assess like the how they come together to form one particular identification.
Yep.
And the behaviors might be uniquely different, or the expression of it might be uniquely different. It was an interesting exercise that I never thought about.
Well,
that,
and we too talk to particularly executive clients about that, how many of them are very different people at work than they are at home. So they're intentionally creating and portraying a version of themselves that they believe will be most successful in giving them what's the only thing anybody wants?
Control
that they're really trying to get. So they'll become very different people in very different situations. So
this one physician, for instance, was talking about how he was raised in the South. He's a Black man and he's 6'9", and so he talked about how he literally trained himself to speak softly because he don't want to come across in heated situations. As physician, we jokingly called it ABS, angry Black syndrome. And so he said he speaks softly so that he doesn't come across as if he's flexing his abs. But that came out of that identity. And so the trainer was trying to work through his understanding of this and why that's necessary to project out that way, because he's just naturally a nice person. But he said, yeah, but to others, when they see me at 6'9", and if I'm in a heated situation with the patient, that could be misconstrued as abs coming across as angry Black syndrome.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, here I thought I'd be finishing up this little subject on flow in 10 minutes. We have successfully done what we've done on so many occasions. We have filled an entire hour. So I love it. I absolutely love it. I want to leave you guys with two things. The first one is my little thought around this. I think I could also say that the truth is also something that parallels this. So the gist is that the person or the truth that you think of as the real truth exists only for you. Now that really doesn't work. I think I'd have to put truth in air quotes and say that there is a very big difference between truth as it survives our biases, or as it emerges from our biases, so that truth is distorted. There might be seeds of real truth in it, but there's all these things that we believe to be true that are deletions, distortions, generalizations of whatever's going on. So I think that's why I want to put it in quotes, that everyone has their own version of what the truth is, but somewhere there is an absolute finite truth about a situation, but we may never know what that truth is. We're only going to get bits and pieces of it. And even when we think we know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, we all have to recognize, well, to the best of our ability as a human, or our willingness based on where we happen to be emotionally and physically, for that matter, in a situation. So I think this is also important to remember, that truth subjective, objective, or do you find people will use that word and include both elements? Yeah.
That's a good question.
Well, it really is. And so this is why when people say, well, I just want to know the truth. Well, how am I ever to believe that I know the absolute truth about everything? Right? I mean, for a long time, think about on our own planet, people thought that lightning and the wind were created by gods. And to them, that was the truth. And so there was, a god of this and a god of that and blah, blah, blah. All right. That served them for whatever reasons, gave them the sense of control they were looking for a certain period of time. And then science came along and said, well, it's actually got more to do with the oceans creating wind currents, and this infects that and blah, blah, blah. And so now we kind of think, well, is that true? I don't know. Is global warming true? It's awfully hot here today. So, I don't know. We only know fractions of what the truth probably really is. So it's all versions, if you will, of the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what I want to do next, I'm going to give you guys just as a piece of homework. And that is that I want to lead you through the experience of a deep dive through the change grid based on something you're actually experiencing in your own life. And so what I want you to do is think about this as this is the activity. I could send you a change grid, but come on, it's one activity. So I want you to just kind of think about this activity, living the life you want most. And when you think about that, and I'll give you a little more narrative around it before you actually give your answers out there, but I want you to just, don't just take that to the surface as a feel-good intention and say, yes, I'm doing that. No, I want you to get to the middle of the change grid, detach yourself completely from the situation, and now tell me where you really are on the change grid. So how do you rate your ability to live the life you want most? How challenging is it for you to live the life you want most? How important is it? How big is it? These are the dimensions we look at, but I want you to kind of answer this question from the PowerPoint, from the beginning of what's going on. Because then I'm going to ask you to answer it a second time, this time with whatever you happen to just be feeling in the moment. And maybe you want to do them differently. If you want to do this as an exercise with someone, you could say, where are you on the change grid? Living the life you want most. Well, if you say, well, my ability is a 12 and the challenge is a 3. All right, you're down in apathy about it. And that's all kinds of problems come with being there. But if I said to you, no, detach yourself. I want you to, on purpose, go to the center of the change grid. And I want you to really think about your ability to live the life you want most. Bet you anything you're going to go like, well, yeah, maybe it's not that great because stuff happens, things appear. How challenging is it? Well, you get the idea. I want you to have the experience of approaching the change grid, both from that immediate response kind of place, and compare that to coming from an intentional, thoughtful place. Let's see how you change things. And then we'll talk about why that could serve you well, why that could work against you in terms of positioning those two different questions there. But bottom line, I want you to just give some real thought to this. How do you rate your ability? How do you rate the challenge of living the life you want most? Okay, so with that, you can all unmute and say any final things you might want to say. So anyone got any final thoughts, questions?
This is excellent. I love that.
I'm glad. I'm very, very glad. I do think that what we've chatted about for this past hour about those thresholds and manipulation and all that, I do believe the world could greatly benefit from that message. I just think it's awfully heavy. And I don't know, it's not a beginner thing to bring up to somebody. I can't imagine that I would ever even talk about those thresholds to someone who doesn't already have a basic understanding of the levels of tension and all that sort of stuff. You agree with me? It's just
yes.
Agree. Oh yeah.
But you guys are, you've already been around. You've either been on these calls long enough that you've absorbed what we're talking about, or you've gone through the training, or you've done both. So I feel okay doing that, but I would not encourage you to share these slides. Do not share these slides with.
Could I add something?
Yeah, sure.
So I appreciate the honesty. I mean, you have to feel really power or centered to be able to share this honest truth. And I wanted to conclude with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yep, it's absolutely true for all of us when we're sharing our own truths. It lives on the heart line.
Yeah.
Truth is greatly distorted, both up grid and down grid. And sometimes that's okay. And sometimes it's problematic. So, you know.
That question strikes me as a flow question, like a lost sense of flow or something that comes to mind to me for some reason.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because remember, we tend to use two different verb forms when we're creating
ing.
Change grid. So that ing ending, the gerund ending, tells us that it is a process.
Right.
As opposed to if I said, how do you rate your ability to live the life you want most? How challenging is it to live the life you want most? Well, is that past tense? Is that present tense? Because you're asking me about this very moment.
Right.
Well, today is a good day. So I think that while both of those different verb forms can serve us well when we're crafting an activity list, I tend to believe that activity, just the word activity, implies that something is being done and it might continue to be done. It's an activity as opposed to a task, which we just want to get off the list. So activity. All right, anyway, we'll talk about it in great detail as our questions continue. So there you go. We'll talk to everybody in a couple of days.
Excellent. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, T.
Well, all right, take care. Bye.
Okay.